sometimes a small soul holds the power to heal the deepest wounds of the human heart. Follow Buddy's extraordinary story and experience a journey of unconditional love and compassion. Snow fell silently over Seattle on a bitter winter night. The streets were empty, with only the soft glow of yellow streetlights breaking through the darkness. Thick snowflakes danced in the air before settling on the ground, creating a pristine white blanket that covered everything in sight. The usual buzz of the city had faded away, replaced by an unusual quietness. Shop windows were dark, their signs covered in a thin layer of frost. The few cars that passed moved slowly, their tires crunching softly against the fresh snow. The clock on the corner read 11:45 p.m., its red digits barely visible through the falling snow. A cold wind whistled between the buildings, making the old street lamps sway gently. Their light created soft pools of yellow on the snow-covered sidewalks, like little islands in a sea of white. A police officer walked his beat, shivering despite his thick winter coat. "Never seen it this cold," he said to himself, his words turning to vapor in the freezing air. His footprints in the snow were the only signs of life on the deserted street. The city felt different tonight, wrapped in its winter blanket. The falling snow muffled every sound, creating a peaceful silence that seemed to hold a hint of magic. Seattle waited quietly, as if knowing this cold winter night would bring something special. At the corner of Pine Street, a lonely bus stop stood against the falling snow. Its metal roof offered little protection from the bitter cold, and the plastic bench beneath it was covered in a thin layer of white. But it wasn't empty tonight. A small dog huddled against the bus stop's glass wall, trying to find shelter from the harsh winter wind. The dog's brown fur was matted with snow and ice, making him look even smaller than he was. His paws were tucked underneath his body, desperately trying to keep warm. Every few minutes he would shake slightly, sending small clouds of snow falling from his coat, only to have them replaced by fresh flakes moments later. His dark eyes remained fixed on the street, watching each passing car with hopeful attention. When headlights approached, his ears would perk up slightly, only to drop again as the vehicles drove past without stopping. There was something deeply sad in those eyes, as if they held a story of loss and longing. Occasionally, the dog would lift his head when footsteps approached, but he never moved from his spot. A few late-night workers passed by, some casting pitying glances his way. "Poor thing," whispered a woman clutching her umbrella. "Someone should help him." But she, like the others, hurried past, eager to escape the cold. The little dog seemed to be waiting for someone specific. Every time a bus pulled up to the stop, he would raise his head hopefully, his tail giving a slight wag. But as each passenger stepped off and walked away, his hope would fade, and he would settle back into his patient vigil. Hours passed, and still the dog remained. The snow continued to fall, collecting on his fur until he looked more white than brown. Yet his eyes never left the street, watching, waiting, hoping. There was something both beautiful and heartbreaking about his unwavering loyalty, staying faithful to whatever or whoever he was waiting for, despite the harsh winter night. Emma's small car traveled the same route every night at exactly 11:30 p.m., passing the lonely bus stop on her way to work. Through her foggy windshield, she could always spot the little dog, a constant presence in the harsh winter landscape. Night after night, she watched him, his small form becoming a familiar sight in her routine. She worked the night shift at a warehouse, packaging orders while the city slept. Each time she drove past, she would slow down slightly, her eyes drawn to the patient dog. Sometimes she would talk to herself, wondering aloud about his story. "Who are you waiting for, little one?" she would whisper, her breath forming small clouds in her cold car. Tonight was no different. As she approached the bus stop, she saw him there, snow collecting on his fur. Emma's fingers tightened on the steering wheel as she fought the urge to stop. Maybe tomorrow, she told herself, just as she had every night for the past 2 weeks. The words had become a familiar excuse. During her breaks at work, Emma would find herself thinking about the dog. She imagined different stories about where he came from. Perhaps he had lost his way home. Maybe his owner had moved away. Each possibility made her heart ache a little more. Her coworker Jenny noticed her distraction one night. "You seem far away," she said, handing Emma a cup of coffee. "Just thinking about this dog I see every night," Emma replied, her eyes distant. "He's always at the bus stop, waiting. I keep wondering why." Yet despite her curiosity and concern, Emma never stopped her car. She would drive past, telling herself that someone else would surely help him, that maybe he had a home somewhere and was just lost. But each night, when she saw him still there, her excuses felt a little weaker and the pull to help him grew a little stronger. Emma's small apartment felt especially quiet tonight. She sat by the window, watching the snow fall as she held an old photograph. In it, her mother smiled brightly, her arms wrapped around a teenage Emma at their last Christmas together. 10 years had passed since the accident, but the pain still felt fresh. "I miss you, Mom," she whispered, running her finger along the photo's edge. The night her mother didn't come home was still vivid in her memory. A slippery road, a distracted driver, and everything changed in an instant. Emma was only 18 then, suddenly alone, in a world that felt too big. Her apartment reflected the life she'd built since then, neat, organized, and mostly empty. No family photos on the walls, no friends' numbers on the fridge. Just the essentials and a few cherished memories of her mother tucked away in a box. She'd gotten good at keeping people at a distance, afraid of losing someone again. So far, so good, since the effects don't last too long. At work, her colleagues often invited her to lunch or after-shift coffee. "Come on, Emma, join us just this once," they would say. But she always declined with a polite smile and a ready excuse. It was easier that way, safer. The night shift suited her well. Fewer people, fewer chances to form connections that could break. As she prepared her usual evening tea, Emma's thoughts drifted to the dog at the bus stop. There was something in his patient waiting that reminded her of herself. She too had waited, for her mother to come home, for the pain to fade, for life to feel normal again. "We're both alone, aren't we?" she said softly, warming her hands on the tea mug. Like the dog, she had learned to survive on her own, but survival wasn't the same as living. Some nights the loneliness felt like a physical weight, pressing down on her shoulders as she moved through her empty rooms. Her mother used to say that helping others was the best cure for sadness. Emma hadn't believed it then, too wrapped up in her own grief. But now, thinking of that little dog sitting alone in the cold, she wondered if her mother had been right all along. Maybe they were both waiting, not just the dog for its owner, but Emma too, waiting for a reason to open her heart again. Days turned into weeks, but the little dog remained a constant at the bus stop. Through bitter winds and heavy snow, he kept his faithful watch. When rain poured down, he huddled closer to the glass wall. During the rare clear nights, he sat alert, his eyes fixed on the street ahead. Emma noticed how other people reacted to his presence. Some hurried past, heads down, pretending not to see. Others would pause, offering bits of food or gentle words. But the dog showed little interest. He would politely sniff their offerings, but never left his post. One particularly cold night, Emma slowed her car more than usual. "Who are you waiting for, little one?" she wondered aloud. The question had been nagging at her mind with increasing frequency. The dog's dedication seemed too deep for a simple stray. There had to be a story behind those patient eyes. Dog flap. Through her car window, she watched him shake off the snow gathering on his fur. His routine never changed. Head up at approaching footsteps, ears perking at the sound of each bus, then settling back into his watchful wait when neither brought who he sought. Maybe he's waiting for his owner, she said to herself, drumming her fingers on the steering wheel. But why here? Why so long? The questions multiplied in her mind as she observed his unwavering vigil. A bus pulled up, its brakes squealing in the quiet night. The dog lifted his head, hope visible in his posture. Passengers filed out, heads bowed against the cold. Each one passed by, and with each passing figure, the dog's tail dropped a little lower. Still, he stayed, his eyes never leaving the street. Emma felt a tightness in her chest, watching this nightly ritual. The dog's loyalty was both beautiful and heartbreaking. Whatever or whoever he was waiting for must have meant everything to him. She found herself hoping, along with him, that each approaching bus would bring the reunion he sought. Each passing night made Emma feel more connected to the waiting dog. She recognized something of herself in his patient vigil, the same loneliness, the same quiet hope that someone would return. During her warehouse shifts, she found herself thinking about him more and more. "I keep seeing that dog at the bus stop," she told Jenny during their break. "It's like he's waiting for someone who never comes." Her voice grew soft with understanding. At home, Emma started researching local missing dog reports. She checked community boards and shelter websites, looking for any clues about where he might have come from. Each time she drove past him, the urge to stop grew stronger. "I should at least find out if anyone knows his story," she thought, watching him through her windshield one night. The dog sat there as always, snow collecting on his fur, his eyes fixed on the street with unwavering faith. Something about his quiet determination touched a place in Emma's heart that she had kept closed for far too long. The rain pounded against Emma's windshield as she drove her usual route to work. Tonight was different, no gentle snowfall, but a harsh winter storm that sent icy rain sideways in the bitter wind. As she approached the familiar bus stop, her headlights caught a pitiful sight. The little dog was still there, but he was shivering violently. His usually fluffy fur was plastered to his body, making him look even smaller than usual. Despite the terrible weather, he maintained his post, though his head drooped lower than normal under the weight of the rain. "Oh no," Emma whispered, her hands tightening on the steering wheel. She watched as a particularly strong gust of wind made him huddle closer to the glass wall, seeking any shelter he could find. His eyes, usually alert and watchful, were squeezed shut against the stinging rain. Emma drove past the stop as she always did, but something inside her finally broke. She couldn't bear it anymore. 20 feet past the stop, she hit the brakes. "I can't leave him like this," she said firmly, making her decision. Not tonight. Her car reversed slowly, windshield wipers working frantically against the downpour. As she pulled up to the bus stop, she could see him more clearly now. Each raindrop seemed to make him shudder, his wet fur dripping onto the already soaked ground. Without further hesitation, Emma put her car in park and turned on her hazard lights. For the first time in all these weeks, she was going to do more than just drive by. Emma reached into her back seat, grabbing the old blue blanket she kept for emergencies and a half-eaten sandwich from her lunch. Her hands trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from nervousness. She had watched this dog for weeks, but this was different. This was real. Stepping out into the rain, she felt the icy drops immediately soak through her jacket. The wind whipped her hair around her face as she approached the bus stop slowly, trying to appear as non-threatening as possible. "Hey there," she said softly, keeping her voice gentle and steady. "I've seen you here every night." The dog's eyes met hers, alert but wary. He pressed himself further against the glass wall, his wet fur creating small rivulets of water down the surface. Emma stopped a few feet away, not wanting to frighten him. She could see him better now. His brown eyes held a mix of fear and curiosity. His tail gave the slightest twitch, but he made no move to approach her. She unwrapped the sandwich slowly, making sure he could see what she was doing. "They had the ship go all day," said Brendan, his voice racking. "You must be hungry," she murmured, placing half the sandwich on the ground between them. "I brought this for you." The smell of food made his nose twitch, but still he hesitated. His eyes darted between Emma and the sandwich, as if weighing his options. The rain continued to pour, but Emma stayed still, letting him decide what to do. She held the blanket in her other hand, water dripping from its corners. "I've got something to keep you warm, too," she said, her voice barely audible above the storm. "I know you're waiting for someone, but maybe I can help while you wait." The dog watched her every move, studying her with an intelligence that surprised her. There was something in his eyes that seemed to be measuring not just her actions, but her intentions. Emma felt like she was being judged by those deep brown eyes, and she hoped she would be found worthy of his trust. Understanding the dog's hesitation, Emma took several slow steps backward until she reached her car. She leaned against the hood, letting the rain soak her completely as she watched and waited. "It's okay," she whispered. "Take your time." The dog's eyes never left her, but his posture relaxed slightly when she moved away. The sandwich lay between them, its scent growing stronger in the damp air. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, he inched forward, his movements cautious and deliberate. First with his nose stretched toward the food, then his front paws took a tentative step. When Emma remained still, he moved closer, finally reaching the sandwich. He ate slowly at first, then with growing enthusiasm as his hunger took over. Emma smiled, feeling a small victory in this simple act of trust. With the food gone, the dog looked at Emma again, but this time with less fear. She carefully unfolded the blanket, spreading it on the dry spot under the bus shelter. "This is for you," she said softly. "It's not much, but it's warm." She stepped back again, giving him space to investigate her offering. The dog approached the blanket, sniffing it carefully. After a moment's consideration, he stepped onto it, turned in a small circle, and settled down. The sight of him curled up on the blanket, slightly less wet and a little less hungry, made Emma's heart swell. "You're such a good boy," she said, her voice warm with affection. So patient and gentle, the dog's tail wagged slightly at the sound of her voice. "You know what? I think I'll call you Buddy. Would you like that?" At the sound of his new name, the dog's ears perked up and his tail wagged a bit more. Emma smiled, feeling a connection forming between them. "Buddy it is then," she said softly. "Don't worry. I'll be back tomorrow night. I promise." As if understanding her words, Buddy lifted his head and gave a tiny whine, the first sound she'd heard him make. His eyes, no longer filled with fear, watched her with a new expression, one of cautious hope. Emma felt something shift in her own heart, a small crack in the walls she'd built around herself. "See you tomorrow, Buddy," she said, reluctantly heading back to her car. In her rearview mirror, she could see him still watching her, comfortable on his blanket, but alert. For the first time in years, Emma felt like she had made a real connection, even if it was with a dog at a bus stop. Sometimes, she thought, the most important friendships start in the most unexpected ways. The morning sun cast long shadows across Seattle's quiet streets as Emma approached the small convenience store near the bus stop. Her footsteps crunched against the partially melted snow, a reminder of the night she first noticed Buddy. The store was a small, weathered building with faded signs and a worn wooden door. A bell jingled as Emma pushed it open, the warm air a sharp contrast to the cold outside. Behind the counter stood a man in his late 50s, arranging newspapers and looking up as she entered. "Excuse me," Emma said softly, her eyes scanning the store before landing back on the shopkeeper. "I was wondering if you could tell me something about the dog that's always at the bus stop." The man paused, a knowing smile crossing his weathered face. He set down the stack of papers he'd been organizing. "Ah, the little brown dog," he said, his voice gravelly but kind. "Been watching him for weeks myself." Emma leaned slightly forward, her curiosity piqued. "Do you know anything about him?" Michael shook his head. "I do not." The shopkeeper, his name tag read Mike, nodded slowly. "Used to belong to Frank, a homeless man who came through here often. Good man, just down on his luck." He wiped his hands on a towel hanging from the counter. "What happened to Frank?" Emma asked, her voice soft with concern. Mike's expression turned somber. "Fell ill about 2 weeks ago. Ambulance took him away. The dog's been waiting at that bus stop ever since, hoping Frank might come back." Emma felt a sudden ache in her chest. The dog's constant vigil now made sense. He wasn't just waiting. He was hoping. "Frank was a quiet man," Mike continued, his eyes distant. "But that dog was everything to him. They were inseparable. When the ambulance came, Frank was too weak to do anything about Buddy." "Buddy?" Emma repeated. Mike chuckled. "That's what Frank called him. Said the dog was his only true buddy in the world." The story unfolded like a delicate thread. Frank, a man who had lost everything, found companionship in a small brown dog. And now Buddy waited, loyal beyond reason, hoping for a reunion that would never come. "Do you know where Frank was taken?" Emma asked, a plan already forming in her mind. Mike pointed to a small business card near the register. "County Hospital, but I heard..." His voice trailed off. "Heard what?" Emma prompted. "Heard Frank didn't make it," Mike said softly. "Passed away a few days after being admitted." "But why did you make it not the top?" The silence between them felt heavy with unspoken understanding. Emma looked out the store's window, seeing Buddy in her mind, waiting, always waiting. Emma felt the nuts reviving under her fingertips and the bracelet falling into place. "Thank you," she said to Mike, her voice barely a whisper. As she stepped outside, the cold air felt different. Buddy's story was no longer just a mystery. It was a testament to loyalty, to love that transcends circumstance. Finding Buddy meant liberating someone from excuses and heartache, had gone somewhere he never thought possible. The county hospital would be her next destination. She needed to know more. Mike leaned against the counter, his eyes growing distant as he began to tell Buddy's story. "Frank wasn't just another homeless man," he said. "He and that dog were closer than most families I've seen." They were. Emma listened intently, her hands resting on the store's worn countertop. The warmth inside contrasted sharply with the cold memories Mike was about to share. 2 weeks ago, everything changed," Mike continued. His fingers absently traced a pattern on the cash register. "Frank had been coming here for years. Always neat, always polite. Buddy would wait outside, patient as could be." The shopkeeper's voice softened. "That morning was different. Frank looked sick, really sick. His usual spark was gone, replaced by a deep, troubling weakness." So, Emma could see the scene unfolding. A man and his faithful dog, their world suddenly disrupted by illness. "I offered him some hot coffee," Mike said, "but he could barely hold the cup." Buddy pressed close to him, like he knew something was wrong. He paused, swallowing hard. I called the ambulance when Frank started shivering uncontrollably. The memory was vivid, the ambulance arriving, its lights cutting through the gray morning, Frank, too weak to protest, being carefully loaded, and Buddy, watching, understanding something was happening to his companion. The paramedics were kind, Mike remembered. They wanted to help Buddy, but Frank insisted. He stays here, he told them. He'll wait for me. Emma's heart ached. A simple instruction born of absolute trust. Frank was taken to County Hospital, Mike said. Buddy watched the ambulance drive away, and then he did something remarkable. He came right back to this bus stop and started waiting. 2 weeks, 14 days of unwavering hope. A dog believing his friend would return, refusing to accept any other possibility. Has anyone helped him? Emma asked, her voice barely a whisper. Mike shook his head. People give him food sometimes, but no one's taken him in. He just waits. The story hung between them, a testament to loyalty that defied logic, to a bond that transcended human understanding. I need to find out what happened to Frank, Emma said quietly. Her decision was already made. The hospital would have answers, and Buddy would finally know the truth. Emma stood outside the store, the cold air filling her lungs with a newfound purpose. Mike's words echoed in her mind. Frank would never return, but Buddy continued his faithful vigil. The bus stop seemed different now. No longer just a random street corner, it was a testament to unbreakable loyalty. Buddy's story wasn't just about waiting. It was about love that knew no boundaries. She watched Buddy from her car. His brown eyes still scanned each approaching bus, hope never leaving his gaze. How could something so small contain such enormous devotion? 2 weeks, Emma whispered. 2 weeks of waiting for someone who'll never come back. Her own memories stirred. The loss of her mother had taught her about unexpected goodbyes. She understood loneliness. She understood hoping against hope. Buddy shifted slightly, his wet fur catching the streetlight. He wasn't just a stray. He was a heart waiting to be understood. I can't just leave him, she told herself. The decision formed quietly, like snowflakes gathering momentum. Her colleague Jenny had once told her, sometimes helping others heals our own wounds. Those words rang true now. Emma remembered her mother's lessons about compassion. A kind act can change everything, she would say. Buddy embodied that kindness. Pure, unconditional love. The dog's loyalty touched something deep inside Emma. He represented hope in its most raw, unfiltered form. Waiting, believing, trusting. Her hands gripped the steering wheel. She would help Buddy. She would uncover Frank's story. She would ensure this faithful companion wasn't forgotten. The streetlight flickered. Buddy remained motionless, watching, waiting. Emma knew her journey was just beginning. Now, the county hospital stood like a gray monument against the overcast Seattle sky. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she pushed through the main doors, Buddy's story driving her forward. A young nurse at the reception desk looked up, her smile professional but kind. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm looking for information about a patient," Emma said. "Frank Langley. He was brought in 2 weeks ago." The nurse's fingers moved across the computer keyboard. Her expression shifted, something between sympathy and professional detachment. "Mr. Langley?" she repeated softly. "Yes, I remember him." Emma held her breath. Each moment felt weighted with anticipation. "I'm afraid Mr. Langley passed away last week," the nurse said gently. Her eyes carried a hint of sadness. "He didn't have any family listed." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Frank was gone. Buddy's endless waiting would never be rewarded. Something must have happened. I said, my voice a bit shaky. "Can you tell me more?" Emma asked, her voice barely a whisper. The nurse hesitated, then pulled out a thin folder. He was brought in with pneumonia, advanced stage. He didn't have many possessions, just an old photograph and a worn leather wallet. Emma listened, her heart aching for Frank, for Buddy. A life reduced to a few papers in a hospital folder. "Was he alone?" she asked. "Completely," the nurse said. "But he spoke about family, a wife, children, something about California." What was the conflict? The fragments of a lost life began to take shape. A man separated from those he loved. A dog waiting at a bus stop, hope eternal in his eyes. Emma thanked the nurse, her mind already forming a plan. Buddy's story wasn't ending here. It was just beginning. Outside, the winter wind whispered stories of loss and loyalty. And somewhere, at a quiet bus stop, a small dog continued to wait. The hospital's quiet hallway felt heavy with untold stories. Emma listened intently as the kind-hearted nurse shared Frank's final moments. It seemed to her that Frank's last words had been, "Life is better with you." In London, there is a healthy cosmology of depression, and life becomes meaningful, Natasha said with a proud look on her face. California seemed like a distant dream for him. Emma leaned closer, her curiosity piqued. The nurse's eyes carried a mixture of compassion and sadness. "Frank made mistakes," she continued. "Years of struggling with alcohol, failed businesses. He'd push away everyone who loved him." Angela tried to keep her emotions in check. Fragments of a painful history emerged. A man who had lost everything, his family, his dignity, his hope. Yet, in his final days, one desire burned brightly. "Reconciliation," the nurse whispered. That's all he wanted. Frank had talked about his wife Linda, about his daughter Sarah, about the grandchild he'd never met. Each memory was a wound. Each memory, a hope. They would cry sometimes, the nurse said, saying how much he regretted pushing them away, how he wished for one more chance. Michael had known clients like this at several prisons. Emma felt a lump in her throat. She thought of Buddy waiting endlessly at the bus stop, a perfect reflection of Frank's own unspoken longing. Dr. Calhoun's clinic was Bud's playground and the most safe place in the world, but that didn't mean it was safe. Emma thought of, did he think they would forgive him? Emma asked. The nurse smiled sadly. Hope is a powerful thing. Even at the end, Frank believed in the possibility of forgiveness. A single photograph had been found in Frank's belongings. A family picture, edges worn, colors faded. A reminder of what was lost and what might still be recovered. His last words were about his family, the nurse said. He wanted them to know he was sorry. Outside, the winter wind seemed to carry whispers of lost chances and unspoken apologies. And at a quiet bus stop, a loyal dog continued to wait, embodying the very hope Frank had carried in his heart. Emma knew her journey was just beginning. Buddy's story, Frank's story, was about to take an unexpected turn. The drive back from the hospital felt different. Something had shifted inside Emma. Frank's story wasn't just a random tragedy anymore. It was a mission. Buddy sat quietly in her passenger seat, his brown eyes watching the road. He seemed to sense something was changing. "We're going to find your family, Emma," whispered. The words felt like a promise. Her mind raced with Frank's final hope. Reconciliation. A chance to mend what was broken. The photograph from his hospital folder sat on the dashboard, a silent map to their destination. California felt like more than a place now. It was hope wrapped in miles of highway and unspoken apologies. Emma called work, explaining she needed time off. Her supervisor seemed surprised. She'd never taken unexpected leave before. But something deep inside her knew this journey was important. She packed carefully, warm blankets for Buddy, Frank's photograph, some basic supplies. Each item felt like a piece of a larger puzzle. "We're gonna make this right," she told Buddy, who tilted his head as if understanding. The shop owner, Mike, gave her Frank's last known address in Los Angeles, a lifeline, a connection to a family that didn't know they were about to be found. The exercisers held their breath as they watched the squad cars left the downtown area. Her small car was packed. Buddy settled in, his loyal eyes fixed ahead, no longer waiting at a bus stop, but moving towards something unknown. Emma felt a strange peace. This wasn't just about helping a dog. This was about healing, about second chances, about bringing a lost story full circle. The highway stretched before them. Seattle faded in the rearview mirror. California and Frank's unfinished story waited. Buddy's tail gave a small, hopeful wag. The journey had begun. The old sedan hummed steadily as Emma and Buddy began their journey south. Miles of highway stretched before them, cutting through landscapes that shifted from green forests to dry rolling hills. A black thorny with perfectly round shape as the front wheel began to turn. Buddy sat quietly in the passenger seat, his head occasionally resting on Emma's arm. Each mile took them further from Seattle, closer to an unknown destination. That was a transcendent experience, Travis. It stays with me. I'm not sure I could ever face that. That was a transcendent experience, she whispered, her hand reaching out to scratch behind his ears. Their eyes met. The afternoon sun was high when the first sign of trouble appeared. A strange rattling sound emerged from the engine. Emma frowned, her grip tightening on the steering wheel. "Come on," she muttered. "Not now." The car's performance grew more erratic. Steam began rising from beneath the hood. One moment they were moving, the next, silence. The engine sputtered and died on a lonely stretch of highway, surrounded by nothing but open countryside. Emma's heart sank. No cell signal, no nearby towns, just endless road and wilderness. Buddy whined softly, sensing her tension. Emma took a deep breath. "It's okay," she reassured him. "We'll figure this out." Hours passed. The sun began to set, painting the sky in orange and purple hues. Emma had checked the engine, but her limited mechanical knowledge offered no solutions. She finally fogged up. A truck approached in the distance, headlights cutting through the growing darkness. Emma stepped out, waving her arms. The truck slowed. An older man, weathered but kind-faced, rolled down his window. "Looks like you're having some trouble," he called out. "My car broke down," Emma explained. "Would you happen to know anything about engines?" The stranger, who introduced himself as Jack, was a retired mechanic. He examined Emma's car with practiced hands, diagnosing a complex engine problem that would require professional repair. "Nearest town is about 50 miles back," Jack said. "I can give you a tow." Emma felt relief wash over her. Buddy watched carefully from the passenger seat, his tail wagging slightly at the stranger's friendly approach. It was clear that Riley had taken the time to prepare a special place for his pet. As Jack's truck pulled Emma's car behind them, she realized this unexpected delay was just another part of their journey, a journey about hope, about connection. Buddy nudged her hand, a silent reminder that they were in this together. The road ahead was long. The small gas station flickered with dim lights, casting long shadows across the empty parking lot. Emma had just finished paying for fuel when she realized Buddy was gone. "Buddy?" she called, her voice rising with panic. The station seemed to swallow her words. No response, no familiar tail wagging, just silence. Hours passed like a nightmare. Emma searched everywhere, behind dumpsters, around abandoned buildings, calling Buddy's name until her voice grew hoarse, tears mixed with dust and desperation. "I can't just disappear," she whispered to herself. As twilight descended, Emma noticed movement near an old pickup truck. A figure walked slowly, an elderly man with slightly stooped shoulders, and following him, tail slightly wagging, was Buddy. Her heart stopped. From a distance, the man looked strangely familiar. Something about his walk, his silhouette, reminded her of Frank's photograph. "Frank," she whispered involuntarily. Buddy followed the man, his movements hesitant but determined. It was as if he'd recognized something, a gesture, a walk, a remembered scent. The man seemed unaware of Buddy, walking steadily toward the station's convenience store. Emma stood frozen, watching this strange reunion that wasn't quite a reunion. 5 minutes later, she was picked up and brought back to the station with Buddy and sent to the station with Buddy. Her mind raced. Could this be a sign? A connection beyond understanding? Buddy glanced back, catching Emma's eye. His look was both apologetic and somehow knowing. The mysterious journey continued, carrying its own unexplained magic. As night settled over the highway, Emma's hand rested gently on Buddy's head. Their recent adventures had woven an unexpected bond between them. The car's heater hummed softly. Buddy's warm presence felt like a comfort after the day's chaos. Getting lost, the broken-down car, Buddy's mysterious disappearance, each challenge had brought them closer. "We're quite a team," Emma whispered. Her mind drifted to Frank's story. Loyalty, forgiveness, such powerful words that seemed to dance between hope and heartache. Remembering, Frank lifted both his coffee in turn. She thought about Frank's endless waiting for family, for redemption. Just like Buddy had waited at that bus stop, just like she had waited years ago for her life to make sense after losing her mother. Loyalty wasn't just about waiting, it was about believing, about holding on to hope when everything else suggested giving up. Buddy shifted, placing his head on her lap. His eyes, deep and understanding, seemed to say he knew exactly what she was thinking. "Some bonds," Emma murmured, "they transcend everything. Time, distance, pain." The highway stretched ahead, moonlight painting silvery paths. Their journey wasn't just about returning Buddy to Frank's family. It was about healing, about second chances. Each mile carried the promise of redemption, stopping a few times. Buddy's soft breathing matched the rhythm of the road. They were more than traveler and companion now. They were partners, connected by a story larger than themselves. During the first light of dawn would bring them closer to their destination, to understanding, to forgiveness. The Los Angeles suburbs sprawled before Emma, a maze of neat houses and manicured lawns. Buddy sat quietly beside her, his eyes fixed on the address Mike had given her. A modest blue house with white shutters stood at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she approached the front door. Buddy remained close, his presence both a comfort and a reminder of their journey. She rang the doorbell. Silence. A woman appeared, Sarah, Frank's daughter. Her eyes were sharp, guarded. The moment she saw Emma, a wall seemed to rise. "Can I help you?" "Ah," Sarah's voice was cool, distant. Emma hesitated. "I'm here about Frank," she said softly. Buddy sat perfectly still, his gaze never leaving Sarah's face. "Ah, pandemic," Emma replied. "It's nearly bedtime." Sarah's expression hardened. "We don't talk about my father," she said, beginning to close the door. "Please," Emma said quickly, "I have something important to share." Sarah paused. Buddy whined softly, a sound so gentle so full of understanding that it seemed to pause time itself. "Who are you?" Sarah asked, her voice losing some of its edge. Emma told her story. About Frank's final days, about his regrets, about Buddy, the constant companion who had waited faithfully at a bus stop for weeks. Sarah listened, her defenses slowly crumbling. The pain of years of separation showed in her eyes. "He left us," she said, her voice breaking. "Years of alcoholism, failed promises. We couldn't trust him anymore." Buddy moved slightly, as if sensing the emotional weight of her words. His gentle presence seemed to speak where words failed. "Never stopped loving you," Emma said softly. Even at the end, all he talked about was his family, his hope of reconnection. Sarah's resolve began to crack, the hurt of years slowly giving way to something more complex, a mixture of pain, curiosity, and a tiny spark of hope. "Would you like to hear more?" Emma asked. Buddy's tail gave a small, hopeful wag, as if he understood that sometimes the first step towards healing is simply being willing to listen. The door remained open, a threshold between past and possibility. Sarah invited Emma and Buddy into the living room. The space felt frozen in time, family photos carefully arranged, yet something painful lingered in the atmosphere. "Tell me everything," Sarah said, her voice soft but guarded. Emma spoke slowly, carefully. She described Frank's final days, his illness, his constant thoughts of his family. Buddy sat quietly, his presence both a witness and a storyteller. "He never stopped loving you," Emma said. "Even when he had nothing, he carried your memories." Sarah's mother, Linda, entered the room. Her eyes were tired, carrying years of unspoken hurt. "We heard these stories before," she said quietly. Buddy shifted, sensing the emotional tension. He moved closer to Linda, his gentle presence seeming to bridge the years of separation. Her face was pale, her eyes drawn and steady. Tommy, Sarah's young son, played with a toy car nearby. He looked up, fascinated by Buddy. "Is this Daddy's dog?" he asked innocently. The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken memories. Sarah disappeared into another room. When she returned, she held an old envelope. "I found something," she whispered. It was Frank's letter, yellowed with age, the edges worn. Her hands trembled as she began to read. "My dearest family," the letter began. "I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness." The room fell silent. Buddy's soft breathing seemed to be the only sound. Linda moved closer, her hand touching the letter's edge. It felt solid and shallow. Frank's words poured out, regret for his alcoholism, his failed businesses, his hope that someday, somehow, they might understand his love for them, had never died. His message to the boys was always the same: "You may be great at what you do, but after all, everyone is born fat. I'm sorry for every moment I wasn't the father, the husband you deserved." The letter read, "My greatest wish is that you'll find it in your hearts to remember the love we once shared." Tears began to fall, not just from Sarah, but from Linda too. Buddy watched, his eyes reflecting a depth of understanding that words could never capture. "What is it to be?" he asked, two-faced and asked. Tommy crawled closer to Buddy, placing a small hand on his fur. "It's okay," he said softly, as if comforting not just the dog, but the entire family's long-carried pain. The letter became a bridge, connecting a past filled with hurt to a future possibility of healing. The letter trembled in Sarah's hands, Frank's words revealing the depth of his pain and regret. "I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness," the letter read. "I failed you, as a husband, as a father, as a man." Linda moved closer, her fingers brushing against the paper. Years of anger slowly melted into something softer, a mixture of pain and understanding. Buddy sat quietly, his eyes moving between each family member. He seemed to understand the weight of each word, each moment of silence, and the love he felt for people so poorly through disease. Frank wrote about his struggles, his alcoholism, the businesses that collapsed, the trust he'd broken. But beneath the words of regret, a deeper love burned, a love that had never truly died. "I never stopped loving you," the letter continued. "Every day I carried the memory of our family. Every moment away from you was a moment of pure pain." Yet the pain was perfectly good. Tommy, Sarah's young son, listened intently. His small hand rested on Buddy's fur, as if drawing comfort from the dog's steady presence. "I hope," Frank had written, "that someday you'll remember the good moments, the laughter, the love we shared before I lost my way." Tears fell silently. Sarah's hand found her mother's. Buddy's tail gave a soft, gentle wag, as if offering comfort. The letter was more than paper. It was a bridge, a connection between past hurt and future hope. "He truly loved us," Linda whispered, her voice breaking. "All this time, he loved us." Buddy moved closer, pressing his head against Linda's leg. A silent promise, a connection beyond words. I took hers in mine, opening her legs together. The room felt different now. The weight of years of silence slowly lifting, replaced by something fragile but beautiful. Her whispered mantras became visible. The possibility of healing. Emma watched, tears in her eyes. Buddy's journey wasn't just about returning to a family. It was about bringing hope where pain had lived for too long. "We can't change the past," Sarah said softly, her hand stroking Buddy's fur. "But maybe we can understand it." The letter lay between them, a testament to love that survived despite everything. Buddy, Frank's faithful companion, had become the unexpected messenger of reconciliation. The silence in the living room gradually dissolved, replaced by a soft, uncertain warmth. Tommy was the first to break through, his small hands gently stroking Buddy's fur. "Be soft," the boy whispered, looking up at his mother with wide, curious eyes. Sarah watched, something shifting in her expression. Buddy sat perfectly still, his brown eyes meeting hers, not challenging, but understanding. It was as if the dog carried Frank's gentleness, his unspoken apologies. Linda moved first, her aged hand reaching out hesitantly. "Come here," she said softly to Buddy, her voice catching slightly. The dog approached with deliberate, careful steps, sensing the fragility of the moment. Ever smiled. "He looks just like the dog in Dad's old photographs," Sarah murmured. Tommy nodded, pressing closer to Buddy. "Can he stay with us?" the boy asked, his innocence cutting through years of accumulated pain. Linda's fingers brushed Buddy's ear and something broke inside her. Tears formed, not of grief, but of a strange, unexpected healing. "He's part of your grandfather's story," she told Tommy. "A story of love, even when love seemed impossible." Buddy seemed to understand. He didn't jump or bark, but settled quietly near Linda's feet, his presence both comforting and profound. The house, once filled with unspoken tensions, began to feel different, softer, more alive. Sarah watched her son interact with Buddy, seeing how effortlessly the dog bridged the gaps their family had carried for years. No words could have done what this simple, loyal creature was doing. "Welcome home, Buddy," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. The afternoon light filtered through the windows, casting a gentle warmth. Buddy's tail gave a soft, quiet wag, a promise of new beginnings, of memories rekindled, of a love that could heal even the deepest wounds. In the weeks that followed, Buddy became more than just a pet. He was a gentle thread weaving through the fabric of their fractured family, slowly mending old wounds. Tommy would sit for hours, listening to Linda share stories about Frank that had been locked away for years. "Your grandfather used to love fishing," she'd say, her fingers absently stroking Buddy's fur. The dog would listen, his eyes attentive, as if carrying the memories within him. One evening, Sarah found an old photo album hidden in the closet. "Look," she said softly to Tommy, "this is Dad, before everything changed." Buddy sat beside them, his head tilted, somehow understanding the weight of each moment. The photographs told a different story. Frank laughing, holding a young Sarah, his eyes bright with hope and love. "He wasn't always the man we remembered," Linda whispered. Buddy pressed closer, a silent companion to their healing. During family dinners, an empty chair seemed less painful now. Tommy would occasionally drop a piece of food for Buddy, whispering, "Grandpa would have liked you." The dog would wag his tail, a bridge between past and present. Sarah noticed how Buddy brought out a softer side in her mother. Linda, who had been distant for years, now smiled more. She'd knit while Buddy lay at her feet, his presence a comfort she hadn't known she needed. "Remember how Dad used to tell those silly jokes?" Sarah asked one day. Tommy listened, wide-eyed, as Buddy sat nearby, tail gently thumping against the floor. The memories no longer felt like sharp edges, but like warm embraces. Family game nights resumed. Buddy would curl up nearby, watching. Sometimes, in the middle of a laugh, they'd catch themselves, feeling Frank's presence through this loyal companion who had traversed miles to bring them together. They were still on the same journey, King Frank's laughter, just this flecks of white light. The house filled with a new kind of sound, not the silence of unspoken pain, but the gentle rhythm of healing. Buddy moved between them, a living reminder that love could find its way home, no matter how long the journey. Emma watched from the doorway, her heart full. The family moved around Buddy with a newfound lightness. Tommy playing, Sarah laughing, Linda's eyes softened by unexpected joy. What had begun as a simple journey now felt like a profound healing. "Would you like some coffee?" Linda asked her, a warmth in her voice that hadn't existed before. Emma nodded, feeling both an outsider and a quiet witness to something magical. Buddy lay near Tommy, his tail thumping gently against the floor. He seemed to understand the transformation happening around him, a silent guardian of renewed hope. Sarah caught Emma's eye and smiled, a smile that spoke of forgiveness, of doors opening where walls had stood for years. "Thank you," she mouthed silently. Emma felt tears gather. Her mother had always said that helping others was the truest path to finding meaning. Standing here, watching a family reunite through one loyal dog's journey, she finally understood what those words truly meant. The room hummed with a quiet, healing energy, and Buddy, the unexpected messenger of love, watched over them all. Seattle welcomed Emma back with its familiar gray skies, but something inside her had fundamentally changed. The journey with Buddy wasn't just a trip, it was a transformation. She'd had a vision and fallen hard back into her old life. Her small apartment felt different now. Photos from the California trip decorated the walls, Sarah's family, Buddy's new home, moments of unexpected healing. Where emptiness once lived, hope now breathed. "I want to make a difference," Emma told her colleague Jenny, her voice steady and determined. She began volunteering at the local animal shelter, spending weekends walking dogs, helping strays find homes. She started listening to podcasts, saw comic books, and became fascinated by the idea of superpowers. Each homeless animal reminded her of Buddy. Each story of loss and loyalty echoed Frank's journey. She saw beyond fur and paws. She saw souls waiting for connection. Exit sidely pause. The shelter became her second home. She organized fundraisers, created adoption programs, spoke passionately about giving second chances. Her colleagues noticed the change. Emma, once quiet and distant, now radiated purpose. "Some animals just need someone to believe in them," she'd say, remembering Buddy's unwavering faith. Her experiences had taught her that love could heal, that loyalty transcended circumstance, and none of that meant much, considering all the things I'd done to deserve it. Soon, however, I would face some tough. On quiet evenings, she'd look at photographs from their journey, feeling a profound sense of meaning. The lonely girl who once drove past a waiting dog had become a beacon of hope for those without homes. Buddy had changed her, and through her, countless other lives would find their way home. Buddy became more than just a pet. He was a living testament to Frank's love and the family's resilience. At family gatherings, his presence told a story words could not capture. Tommy would proudly show friends his grandfather's dog, explaining how Buddy traveled miles to find them. "He never gave up," the boy would say, his eyes shining with admiration. Sarah started a small foundation in Frank's name, inspired by Buddy's journey. They supported programs helping homeless families reconnect, believing in second chances. "Some bonds," she'd tell donors, "can survive anything." Linda began writing Frank's story, using Buddy as her muse. Old photograph albums emerged from dusty shelves. Family dinners became moments of shared memories, laughter replacing old silences. Weekend barbecues now included Buddy, who moved between family members with a gentle grace. He seemed to understand the healing he'd brought, a silent guardian of their newfound connection. Tommy learned about forgiveness through Buddy's story. "Grandpa's dog taught us that love doesn't give up," he'd tell his school friends, stroking Buddy's fur. The family's conversations shifted. No longer trapped in past hurts, they spoke of hope, of understanding, of the unexpected ways love finds its way home. Buddy, with his patient eyes and wagging tail, remained the heart of their transformation, a living bridge between what was lost and what could be rebuilt. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the living room window, casting a warm glow on Buddy. He lay peaceful, his brown fur catching the light, eyes half closed in contentment. The green garden stretched before him, a world of possibility, of freedom, of home. "Remember when Dad used to tell those fishing stories?" Sarah asked, her voice soft with nostalgia. Tommy leaned closer, his small hand resting on Buddy's back. Linda smiled, pulling out an old photograph. "He was always happiest near water," she said. The family gathered around, sharing moments they'd locked away for too long. Tommy's eyes sparkled. "Tell me about the big fish Grandpa caught," he urged. Buddy's tail thumped gently against the floor, as if he too was listening to the story. Laughter filled the room, a sound that had been absent for years. Each story peeled back another layer of Frank's memory, transforming pain into something beautiful, something healing. Outside, the garden swayed with late afternoon breeze. Buddy watched, his eyes reflecting a peace he'd found after a long, lonely journey. He had brought more than himself to this family. He had brought hope. Miles away, in her Seattle apartment, Emma felt a warmth spread through her heart. She thought of Buddy, of Frank, of the incredible journey that had connected strangers. Her mother's words echoed, "Helping others heals your own heart." The photograph of Buddy by the window sat on her desk, a reminder that love finds its way home, no matter how long the journey. Her heart felt full, complete, connected to something larger than herself. Thank you so much for watching Buddy's incredible story. If this heartwarming journey touched your heart, please give this video a thumbs up. Leave a comment to share your thoughts, and let us know how you felt about Buddy's story. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories like this and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Your support means the world to us. Thank you.